The allotment rents rose. Several tenants complained. Several tenants left their allotments, but not on Crownfield Bank. At the start of an Holbeach Parish Council meeting, there is what is known as the open forum, where a parishioner can ask the council a question regarding the parish. At the September council meeting of 2000, I attended and used the open forum to raise the question regarding the raising of the allotment rents. I put it to the chairman of the council, Councillor Francis Biggerdike, that the raising of the allotment rents was an act of fraud, and gave him a copy of the planning application plan used for the building plot and asked him to go and measure the boundaries. He said he would agenda it for the next month's meeting. Come the next month's meeting, Councillor Biggerdike sent his apologies, but it was agendered for a report by Councillor Nickworth in regard of the Crownfield Bank allotments. In the open forum, I stood up and asked if the building plot had been measured. To be told it was an agendered item and I should sit down. When the council reached the allotments on the agenda, Councillor Worth stood up to give his report. Councillor Worth claimed his report was in response to Mr Poll's outburst at the last parish council meeting, in which he accused the council of fraudulently increasing the allotment rents and passed documents relating to other issues to the chairman. The only item given to the chairman at the meeting was a plan of the building plot on the left hand side of the allotment roadway and a request for him to measure it. Councillor Worth's next words set the tone of the report. Trying to make some sense from the documents nearly required the use of the ENIGMA machine had it not been stolen from Bletchley Park. But having consulted widely, I am sure I've got the gist of what Mr Poll is getting at, although some of this dates back to 1992. Apparently the documentation he was referring to was what was given to a councillor in December of 1998, when the council was trying to raise the allotment's rents, and I did not agree with it. At the time, Councillor Worth was bemoaning the fact that the allotments had become into big blocks, contrary to allotment policy. The documentation detailed when the allotment was let to me and at what time scale. The first issue, he claimed, was an allotment let to Mr Rook, but when Mr Rook did not pay on time, it was re-let to Mr Poll. Soon afterwards, Mr Rook's payment for number 11 arrived at the parish office, and at this stage the then allotment chairman, Councillor Pearl, decided rightly that as no payment had been received from Mr Poll, the allotment should remain with Mr Rook. The allotment was originally let to Mr Rook in April of 1994, but upon the July allotment inspection it was noted he had not cultivated his allotment. Upon being let an allotment, a letter is sent to you from the clerk. I am instructed by the council to offer you the tenancy of the above allotment. I enclose tenancy agreement, and if you approve of it, will you please sign where indicated, have your signature witnessed, and return the complete form to me. Until which time this is done, the allotment is not officially let. It was found that Mr Rook had not returned his tenancy agreement, and the allotment was re-advertised for letting. The allotment was let to me in September 1994. The tenancy agreement was to run from the 11th of October 1994. But before I started work on the allotments, some white stakes appeared. The clerk was informed, and then subsequently I was informed that Councillor Pearl had returned the allotment to its previous tenant, Mr Rook. At the council meeting of December 1994, a letter is reported from myself in which I point out to the council that I have done nothing wrong in respect of the allotment. It is also reported that Mr. Rook has still not returned his tenancy agreement. I received a letter from the clerk dated the 23rd of December stating that she had now got an allotment agreement in the office signed by Mr. Rook. It was dated the 1st of November 1994. In the spring of 1995 the stakes were removed from the allotment and a local farmer planted it with potatoes. The question is, what is the claimed payment received at the parish council office? Rents are paid 6 months in arrears, so Mr. Rook was not liable to pay a rent demand until the 11th of October, but the allotment was let to me in September. Surely Councillor Worth is not admitting that councillors take bribes. Councillor Worth stated in June 1998, I asked that a notice to quit be served on Mr. Rook as his allotment was so untidy, and the letter sent came back to the council via the post office stating gone away. The documentation given to the councillor in December of 98 actually stated that number 11 Crownfield Bank, Mr. Rook's allotment, was being used for game cover. At the September meeting it was announced that Mr. Rook's allotments were being tidied up, but number 11 Crownfield Bank was not. Councillor Worth was not at the September meeting and Councillor Pearl read his report. The report requested that number 11 Crownfield Bank be held over from letting, as the allotments would be returning to the Crown. At the October council meeting it was again requested that number 11 Crownfield be held over from letting. In November the allotment was overgrown. It was being used by the local shoot as game cover, a fact reported to the councillor in December of 1998. The allotment was in use, but the council had no official tenant. Was anybody paying for the use of this allotment? And if so, where did the money go? Councillor Worth stated number 11 was subsequently re-let and the only applicant was Mr. Ebbage, who is the current occupier. No. The allotment was never advertised for letting. It was announced at the council meeting of May 1999 that Mr. Ebbage had sprayed it by mistake, and subsequently they let it to him. Councillor Worth went on. Mr. Poll still thinks he has a tenancy agreement for this allotment. Having spoken today to the auditor, it is quite clear that if a rent had not been received for it, he can have no claim to it. The Holbeach Parish Council tenancy agreement states that allotment rent should be paid 6 months in arrears. Does this mean that your tenancy can be terminated at any point up till you have paid your first rent demand? Not according to the Tenancies Act. Councillor Worth then went on to talk about the boundary dispute and referring to the 2.1 metre wide strip which both parties think is theirs. At this point I had had enough of his smirking. I stood up and said, that is not the boundary dispute. The acting chairman told me to sit down. I did not. He then said if I did not sit down he would call the police. So I took my mobile phone out of my pocket and offered it to him. I sat down and Councillor Worth continued. You made great issue of the small piece of land and that I had not signed a piece of paper agreeing not to plough it up.
He didn't mention to the councillors that neither of the householder had agreed either. He did mention that during consultations over the dispute, the Crown had offered to take the allotments back, but as we still have more than 2 allotment holders, this has not materialised so far. The third issue, which was specifically raised by Mr. Poll at the last meeting, was that of fraudulently increasing the rates. The Parish Council is under an obligation under the Agricultural Tenancies Act to review rents every 3 years. No, the Council is not under an obligation to review the rents every 3 years. If you have a rent review, you may not have another rent review for 3 years. At the next council meeting, Councillor Worth contradicted himself. Consider decreasing rents. With 16 allotments unlet and agriculture going through a bad time, the council agreed to make a reduction in the rents. The rents were returned back to their former level, where they still remain. At this point, I should make one point quite clear. The council does not have to give any reason for increasing the rent. If the allotment holders do not like the decision, then they have the choice to walk away and not renew their tenancy. Well, one could always go to arbitration. Councillor Worth goes on. It should be noted that should the allotments as a whole lose money, then the parish precept would increase, and I do not think Holbeach parish ratepayers would thank us for that. With a rent increase of £12 per acre, funds should increase, but with several tenants giving their allotments up and them remaining unlet, overall the ratepayers lost out. I would like to finish by saying to Mr. Poll that if he is not satisfied with my answers, he should go directly to the District Auditor and make his accusations to him. I, for one, have a clear conscience. Councillor Worth gave a copy of the report to the reporter from the local newspaper, so I insisted on one that night. Councillor Worth gave me his copy, to which he had written on the side, Carter Jonas measured on behalf of the Parish Council when I was present. I contacted the local paper regarding Councillor Worth's report at the council meeting and what I thought was wrong with it. When they wrote their article, all they said was, after the meeting, Mr. Poll said he disagreed with the report. I contacted the District Auditor and he said, "Who is Councillor Worth? I have never met him."